Hello everyone and welcome to the Battle for the Virginia Central Railroad Custom Multiplayer Game Episode 5. In Episode 4, we reviewed the new intel that the two sides received. We then critiqued their plans and how they adjusted with this new information. And we also talked about a few potential missed opportunities for both sides. In this episode, there's going to be a lot more action. Both sides are moving forward with attack plans on the opposite flanks of the enemy army. That'll be interesting to see develop. But first, can Buford escape Stuart? Stuart is really pressing against Buford's men right now, and he's starting to wrap around his flanks. Will Buford be caught out in the open, or will he have a chance to escape? It is 8:40 a.m. in this game, and the statistics up to this point will reveal that there really hasn't been much action up to now, but don't worry, that is definitely going to change. Alright, here's the map at 8:40 a.m. We're now going to take our first turn after the two sides have concluded their meetings, and if you watch the map, all the units will begin to move a little bit. And we are now at 9 a.m. South of the Bend area, the Union 5th and 3rd Corps are moving to the east to attack the Confederates in column that they observe south of Fredericks Hall. That is actually A.P. Hill's 3rd Corps, and they are currently moving towards these woods here in an effort to protect the southern flank of the Confederate Army and to defend that area. One thing I will say, though, is that that area really has no good defensive flanks. Although the woods are a good defensive line, I question whether all the roads around the eastern side of that area are going to be able to be defended. That is something to watch as we go forward. But what we want to watch right now is Buford. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this area right here. And you can see that the Confederates are really rushing forward to try and capture as many Federal cavalrymen as they can. Johnson's division is arriving to add their weight to the action, while Stuart's cavalrymen are rushing forward to try to get around any of the Federal cavalrymen that they can and cut off their lines of retreat. Buford, meanwhile, has been trying hard to extricate his men from this Confederate swarm all around him, but the noose continues to tighten. Does he realize that the window is quickly closing, or will he dawdle perhaps one turn too long and pay a hefty price? The Confederates are doing an absolutely great job of blocking all these different zones of control. All the red stars on the map now represent a Confederate zone of control established by their cavalry. As you can see, Stuart is doing an excellent job of making it almost impossible for the Federals to continue to do what they want to do. So the question moving forward, I think, is does Buford continue to try to get his men out of this trap, or does he just fall back now, especially with so much Confederate infantry coming up the road? I think he obviously has to fall back. The question is he going to be able to with the Confederates being so aggressive? Back to the overhead map now. Let's go ahead and go to the 9:20 a.m. turn. And Stuart succeeded in capturing hundreds of Federal troopers in that last turn, as Buford was forced to abandon those units which were cut off that we saw a moment ago. In that fighting, Brigadier General Wesley Merritt was among those captured by Stuart, and that is the first officer in this game to become a casualty. What we want to do now is focus actually on this Bend area itself. And I'm going to pull it up on the screen so we can get a better look. And there we go. The two sides are rapidly coming together in this area just south of the Bend. The Federals have managed to reach this area first with their infantry, so they are going to have an advantage. I think the Confederates were still hoping that they could get there first, but that's obviously not going to happen. But let's take a look. So all this infantry here. For the Federals, it is the 6th Corps of Sedgwick's, and for the Confederates, it is Breckinridge's division of Longstreet's Corps. All the Confederate cavalry here have done an excellent job of screening Breckinridge's advance. It's only been in the last turn that the Federals finally got their first look at the Confederate column moving towards the Bend. Luckily for the Federals, they're going to be about 2 turns ahead of the Confederates, and they're going to be able to reach that area first. So the question for Longstreet is, does he move to the northwest for the Bend itself and attack there? Or does he detour to the south and perhaps head for those woods south of the Bend? I feel like the woods would make more sense, as the Federals cannot allow them to hold that position there south of the Bend. But the Bend itself might be a more tempting target for Longstreet if he does decide to go on the offensive. So we're going to have to wait and see what Longstreet decides as it becomes increasingly obvious that the Federals have occupied the Bend with infantry. Back to the overhead map, and we're going to go to the 9:40 a.m. turn now. And Sykes with the 5th Corps is about to make contact with the head of Hill's Corps in the thick woods south of Fredericks Hall. Sykes continues to be extremely aggressive, and it's really working to his advantage as he is forcing the entire Confederate 3rd Corps to move into battle line and to anticipate being attacked at any moment. Meanwhile, equally aggressive is Stuart on the opposite flank. He has thrown back Buford's men all across his front area. Not only that, he's getting around his flanks as well. Buford could lose a lot more men if he doesn't retreat a whole lot faster. Because, as I said, you can just see here Early's going around one flank, and Stuart is wrapping around the others with random units as quickly as he can. All the areas that Buford can escape to are rapidly closing. Meanwhile, Buford's other brigade commander, Colonel George Chapman, has been wounded in the fighting with Stuart's men. That is the second of Buford's brigadiers to go down. All this action now has prompted General Meade to remark to his Chief of Staff Humphreys that we have a big decision to make when Pleasanton arrives with his other 2 divisions. With Buford being severely mauled, he will not be able to hold our northern flank and keep Stuart away from our western objectives. Do we attempt to send Pleasanton east still after the enemy objectives, or do we send him north to protect our own? Humphreys replied that I would not send our cavalry to the east after the enemy objectives or to the north. We should use our cavalry divisions to feel for the enemy left flank and make them bring their own cavalry to stop us. We would keep the initiative and possibly do great harm to their flank and rear. Moving now to the 10 a.m. turn. The first infantry action of the battle has occurred between the Union 5th Corps and Anderson's division of Hill's Corps. Most of Hill's Corps has actually moved into battle line now, as he is preparing to fight the Federals advancing against his position. But with neither of Hill's flanks anchored on any strong natural geographical position, the Federals could quickly dislodge him if they maintain their aggressiveness. All of the Federals of the 5th Corps and even some of the 3rd Corps are putting pressure on Hill's right flank. If they break through that flank, they could just roll up Hill's entire line. Meanwhile, the other flank just has a completely open road all the way around it, and that road leads completely behind the entire Confederate army. I'm actually really surprised that this hasn't been addressed, or at least some units left there in order to guard this road. This could be a major problem for the Confederates moving forward. Meanwhile, Buford has continued to flee to the rear. He is being pursued by the Confederate forces, and he should be able to escape mostly intact if everything goes his way. But so far for Buford, it just seems that he's had one disaster after the other over the last hour or so. So we're going to see what happens here. Early's division is coming right up against him, and they're about to go into line and pour a devastating fire into his flank. If Buford begins to suffer some routes and some disruptions, it could be a disaster. And let's actually look at the numbers right now, because things have changed a whole lot in just the last hour or so. At the beginning of this episode, there were just a few casualties for both sides, but now we have 855 Federal cavalry losses and 400 Confederate losses. And we're also starting to get some infantry losses for the 2 sides as well. As I said, this thing is going to escalate rather quickly. Now, with all these losses for the Federals and the problems that Buford is having, it was decided to call a timeout. And this is the second of 6 timeouts that the Federals can use on day number 1. So the conversation began with General Meade saying that I am calling a command meeting to discuss our next moves and what we should do about Pleasanton's arriving divisions. Humphreys then stated that we still don't know for sure what lies beyond our own right flank. We have no cavalry there to make sure our 3rd Corps isn't exposing their own flank as they turn northward against the enemy. Once our cavalry arrives, Sykes said, I believe they should head to cover my right flank and perhaps hit the enemy's flank and rear. Our combined forces can cause the enemy great discomfort and will soon force them to flee the field. Pleasanton chimed in that Buford has suffered heavily, but I still favor an attack on the enemy flank and rear to make them suffer. Our northern flank will have to be held by Buford's reformed units and the infantry. Newton said, I'd like to move my men to the northeast and attack any Rebs heading south for the railroad and towards our flank and rear. Our cavalry held them just long enough for our infantry to arrive. It's like Gettysburg all over again. On my front, I believe the battle is going in our favor, Sedgwick said. My men are about to be engaged and are looking forward to the fight. I feel the rebel cavalry will be drawn to our northern flank after the beating they have given Buford. With this force, they could isolate and destroy any lone infantry regiments or brigades sent against them. I agree, Newton said, that the rebels are likely to mount a cavalry raid on our northern flank. But I believe we can resist these raids without overly committing additional forces to the effort. If necessary, we can call on Pleasanton for more men from his 2 arriving divisions to watch the flank. Sykes agreed. Whatever we do, we must keep up the pressure on Lee. Let us assume the role of aggressors here and keep the initiative. And with that, the meeting came to a close. Meade had some final parting words for his commanders that our plan will remain the same. Newton will work with Buford to hold our rear areas and protect the northern flank. Sedgwick will link with the 1st Corps to protect our center, and Sykes will continue his attack but must watch his right flank, which is still in the air. Pleasanton will move with his divisions to the right of the 3rd Corps and find out if the enemy is attempting to turn our flank. If not, they are to hit the enemy flank and rear and create as much chaos as they can behind enemy lines. So my quick 2 cents about the federal meeting here. And despite some confusion about which columns represent which Confederate Corps, which I left out of this discussion, the Federals are really making the right moves here. Continuing the attack with Sykes is the right move to make. Doing so keeps the pressure on Robert E. Lee and will rob Lee of the initiative in this battle. It's also a low-risk attack with Sykes. The Federals can disengage at any point and fall back to the west. The Federals have lots of open roads that they can utilize, and the 6th Corps provides a place to rally for the 3rd and the 5th Corps should they need to do so. The concern about the right flank of the 3rd Corps is a valid concern. Looking at it from above, we know there really is no threat to the 3rd Corps' flank, but they don't know that on the ground right now. Pleasanton's absence, though, is being felt. If they had just a few more cavalry units, they probably wouldn't have any concerns at all. But in a few hours, all that will change because Pleasanton has begun to arrive from the south. Alright, going back to the overhead map now, it is 10 a.m. in the game, and we're going to move ahead to the first turn after the federal meeting. Up in the north, Buford continues to take heavy losses. Early's division has gone into line and are trying to run down Buford's men. Some Federal cavalrymen have routed, others have been disrupted. It's beginning to look very bad for Buford's division. Meanwhile, there's been a lot of action south of the Fredericks Hall area, just in this area here. So let's go ahead and zoom in on that part of the map. So here we have a whole lot of units. It is the 5th Corps moving directly east along that road into the wooded area against Anderson's right. And it's the 3rd Corps to the south with their 3 divisions pressing against Heath and Wilcox and wrapping around the Confederate flank. Hill's Corps has about 19,500 men, and the Federals have about 30,000 men here. The Confederates remain in motion, as you might be able to tell from the map there. A lot of their guns are still limbered up, their wagons are trying to get out of the way, and their infantry is still moving north to try to get into those woods. I think what they're trying to do is just build up a line, something like this, but I'm not too sure how successful this line will be, even if they're able to get into this position, because they have two wide open flanks, which are going to cause them problems. If the 5th Corps continues to attack and begins to wrap to the north, there's nothing presently there to stop them. And if the 3rd Corps continues to wrap around the other flank, with perhaps Carr's division, there's another wide open flank there that leads directly behind all of Hill's Corps and in fact the entire Confederate Army. Stuart has continued to do an excellent job, and he has reached a point where he has eyes on the central area behind the Bend area. So with this new position and this new intel, for the first time they've spotted the Union 1st and the Union 2nd Corps moving to the east towards the Bend area. And this intel is going to be really important for the Confederates moving forward, as they've been wondering where's the 1st and the 2nd Corps. This finally confirms that they're directly behind the 6th Corps and not perhaps on one of their flanks or further to the north. Lastly, down to the south, you can see that Pleasanton has begun to arrive on the map with the first of his brigades. He has 2 whole divisions coming from this area, so the Federals are about to be reinforced by a whole lot of cavalry from the south. Moving now to the 10:40 a.m. turn, and Buford is being slowly gobbled up. He just can't get away. His units are disrupted, they're routing, they keep getting hit from every side, and I just don't see any way that Buford's remaining units can escape this trap around them. The Confederates are doing a great job. Stuart is moving around the flanks of Buford to really cut off any avenue of escape that he could possibly use. I just don't see any of his units being able to escape right now. Meanwhile, in the center of the battlefield, heavy fighting has broken out between the right flank of A.P. Hill's Corps and the Union 5th Corps. As mentioned a minute ago, this part of the line for the Confederates is very weak. The 3rd Corps' right flank is definitely in the air, and with the 5th Corps moving to outflank them from that side, it's really going to be hard for A.P. Hill to continue to hold there. But there is help on the way. Field's division from Longstreet's Corps has turned in that direction. If they're able to reach the right flank of A.P. Hill in time, they might be able to stop the Union attack from the 5th Corps and hold that flank. But there's still the other flank of the 3rd Corps which remains in the air, and there are Federals moving in that direction. That is going to be really interesting to watch moving forward. Meanwhile, to the south, Wickham has arrived. He has reached this point here where Thompson's Crossing is, and if you recall in the last episode, I said that if Wickham hurried and went as fast as he could reach Thompson's Crossing 1 turn ahead of the Federal cavalrymen, and that's actually what he has done. From this position here, he will be able to spot the oncoming Federal cavalrymen as they approach Thompson's Crossing. Wickham's position here actually offers a very good line of sight to the southwest. But I will say that I am a bit disappointed because Wickham has only brought 1 regiment and 1 4-gun battery to this crossing point. He does have more units scattered around the area, as you can see on the map there, and he also has an additional 8 artillery pieces. And if he had brought all those forces to this crossing, there is no way the Federals would attempt to cross there. Instead, he actually has 8 guns sitting way back here to the east, and I'm not really sure why you have 8 guns that far back to the east when they're desperately needed at this crossing point. But maybe those 4 guns and maybe that 1 regiment by themselves will be enough of a deterrent to keep the Federals back and force them to move for another crossing point. We're just going to have to wait and see. Okay, with so many different things going on right now, I think this is a good place to take a break and check out the losses. As you can see, the Federals have taken a lot of losses in just the last 2 hours. They are now up to 1,671 cavalrymen and 304 infantrymen. The Confederates have suffered also, but not nearly that much. The Federals have also lost 2 artillery pieces and 3 leaders. Meanwhile, total points for the 2 sides, you can see the Federals are already up to 1,543 points, and the Confederates are at 487. As a percentage of how much they are to their max total, the Federals are just 11.5% of the way there, and the Confederates 4.4% of the way to their max point limit. So there is still a very long way to go in this battle. So what is up next? Well, with the Federals coming upon Thompson's Crossing, what are they going to do? Meanwhile, Early's division has been delayed trying to mop up the rest of Buford's division. And any rebel attack by Ewell, which was originally planned against the Federal left flank, is going to be going up against overwhelming numbers. And so do these plans change? The Confederates can see the 1st and 2nd Corps arriving on that side of the map, and I have to believe they're having second thoughts about launching an attack in that direction, especially if they only have maybe one division currently available to do it. Another thing that I'm looking forward to seeing is whether or not Sykes continues to be so aggressive as he has been up to this point. If he continues to do this, there's every reason to believe that he'll eventually discover that the Confederate left flank is completely in the air. And after that happens, who knows? And it's just Hill's flanks, they worry me. His right flank with Anderson's division is already starting to get turned by the 5th Corps. Field's division from Longstreet might help that situation, but it's too early to tell. And Hill's other flank, as I just mentioned, is completely unguarded. So there is a lot there to be concerned about. As always, thank you to everyone who has watched this video and all the other videos. I do appreciate it. Go ahead and hit the like button on here if you enjoyed it, and also subscribe so you'll get updates whenever there are new videos posted to the American Civil War Gaming Club YouTube channel. If you want more information about our club, you can go to acwgc.net and check us out. Thank you.